Well, thank you for the opportunity to share some remarks at the start of this important conversation of the Forestry and Agriculture Investment Summit. The regular decisions that we make in our everyday lives can pose serious threats to forests and ecosystems, specifically through what we consume. From our morning cup of coffee to an afternoon biscuit or even a steak dinner, we're using products that are grown in forest ecosystems. And every year, the world loses 100 million hectares of forests, which is an area larger than Portugal. Protecting the world's forest is crucial to meet the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. Our forests provide an array of critically important ecosystem services, mitigating up to 5 gigatons per year, while providing habitat for biodiversity and providing livelihoods for vulnerable and indigenous communities. With the world's population predicted to reach 9 billion by 2050, it's estimated that 70% more food calories will be needed, while demand for wood products is also going to continue to increase. So transformational change for nature and people requires addressing the underlying drivers of biodiversity loss. And food production is the biggest driver. It's the biggest driver of biodiversity loss and also land use change and deforestation, and it's a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. So this Food and Agriculture Investment Summit is an opportunity to really galvanize collective action towards nature positive financing. And I'm so honored to be opening this event today. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to change the way food and non-food commodities are produced, traded, financed, and ultimately consumed. Let's demonstrate that financing deforestation-free value chains is economically viable and scale up models that have proven to work. There's currently a mismatch between what's happening on the ground and the investor crowd. We need to move from a grant world to a profitable world for restoration to be able to finance a sustainable agricultural value chain. But there are a few bottlenecks that need to be removed, like the ability to structure bankable projects beyond grant financing, the support of innovative fund managers, and the ability to show financial return from proof of concept of financial products beyond just the academic papers. At UNEP, we've been initiating, leading, or supporting initiatives to try and connect these dots. For example, through the Restoration Seed Capital Facility, which stimulates more private fund managers and investment advisors to set up new funds that focus on forest and landscape restoration, building strong pipelines to make sure that more projects reach financial close. Another example is the Restoration Factory, which aims to empower restoration entrepreneurs as they turn degraded ecosystems into bankable business models. The Agri3 Fund is a partnership with Rabobank, UNEP, IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative, and FMO. And this blended finance vehicle was created to provide guarantees and soft loans to enable long-term lending and reduce credit risk of clients, particularly smallholder farmers that have little credit history sometimes, and to achieve nature and climate positive agricultural production. One of my favorite examples comes from Brazil, where this mechanism is driving forest protection and renovating degraded pasture lands in an area of Mato Grosso. By linking financing for pasture lands renovation with forest protection, Rabobank and Agri3 provide this model of growing more sustainably, which will enable growth in cattle without clearing new land. The goal is to increase profitability while accelerating compliance with Brazil's forest code legislation. This innovative structure, which includes de-risking over a longer repayment period, offers a model for financing the next step of sustainable investments in non-cash generating activities like forest protection. While we're showing that deforestation-free value chains are economically viable, we also need to standardize environmental and social impact indicators and improve traceability. Just like we're using carbon as a primary unit to measure energy transition, we need a standardized way in which public and private investments in agriculture and forest supply chains is traced, monitored, and evaluated. And here's a conundrum. Currently, there's a wide range of standards in the investment landscape with little or no regulation just yet. Some are sectoral or some specific to financial institutions. So there's a need to standardize to scale. But on the other hand, given the wide range of forms that a transaction can take place, there's also a need to be mindful and to be specific. So we need to accommodate both sides of this coin. And to do so, there are a couple of initiatives already under development, like the EU taxonomy on sustainable finance. It's a great example to provide clarity on what kinds of business activities across multiple sectors are regarded as sustainable. Moreover, the mandatory disclosure requirements are likely to accelerate investment in assets that are deemed sustainable by the European Commission. Another great example is the Climate Bonds Initiative. And this has put in place standards for sustainable agriculture and food investment, which should help in giving guidance to investors in structuring, underwriting, or buying green bonds. A recent innovation that UNEP's been working on with banks and impact investments is to also put in place standardized key performance indicators that all stakeholders across the financial value chain can use to measure the positive climate, forests, biodiversity, and livelihood impacts that correspond to deforestation-free ways of producing, processing, or trading in those commodities. This is reflecting global best practices and creating the foundation of what, in the near future, could become an alternative asset class for deforestation-free and sustainable land use assets on the books of banks and investors. Ensuring the economic value of carbon is visualized and priced in our global economy is also a vital element in the drive to make commodity supply chains more sustainable. And UNEP's working on, for example, the Green Gigaton Challenge to accelerate investments that reduce and remove emissions from tropical forests by seeking more corporate commitments and working to establish minimum prices for high-quality forest carbon. The Lowering Emissions by Accelerating Forest Finance, or the LEAF Coalition, seeks to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by providing substantial financial support to tropical and subtropical countries that successfully reduce emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. Government and private sector participants can pay high-quality emission reductions from forests, in addition to, but clearly not as a substitute for, corresponding deep cuts in their own emissions. Creating additional revenue streams for forest ecosystem services is a critical element to speed up the transition to sustainable commodities. So let's create economic and regulatory incentives to move to deforestation-free value chains. This has been established already through the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, which was led by Michael Bloomberg and Mark Carney. Over the past 15 months, the number of organizations expressing support for the TCFD has grown by more than 85%, with a market capitalization of $12.6 trillion, and financial institutions responsible for assets of $150 trillion. A similar effort for nature was launched this year and will deliver reporting framework by 2023, and that's the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. Both of these task forces will be very relevant in all corporate and financial actors in the agricultural value chain and will hopefully accelerate the drive to sustainable commodity supply chains by pricing the risks of failing to account for nature and climate. So it's time to galvanize political and business momentum to restore the earth. This so-called super year for nature in 2020 was effectively delayed as a result of the pandemic. And with international summits being planned now for climate, biodiversity, and land degradation, let's use every opportunity to galvanize political will and business momentum to address the climate, nature, and land degradation crises head on. These all come together in our food systems. In addition to the COPs being planned, UNEP, FAO, and partners are working together to launch the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration starting this year, and also the upcoming UN Food Systems Summit. I hope that the positive momentum and the lessons that can be taken away from today's summit will pave the way for the much needed successful negotiations, as well as government and corporate leadership. Thank you.